Hello there. Welcome to another episode of the African Business Show. And today, our major focus will be business building block. More specifically, we're going to look at how successful implementation of strategy will help your business, especially in Africa, where everything is fragmented, unpredictable, and is a pretty chaotic market. But before we go in, I'd like you to do something for me. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel at Business 360. Go to thisisbusiness360.com to read our news and intelligence. And so please subscribe to this YouTube channel so that you can get notified when we drop new content, So today we'll dive straight into it and we'll be discussing strategy. We'll be looking at what strategy is not. We'll be looking at the 6 principles in implementing strategy within the African business context. The third point is that we'll be looking at a 5-level framework so that we have a simple, actionable insight into how you can implement strategy successfully as an entrepreneur or as a business manager. Yeah, so let's get right straight into it because there's a lot to unpack today, right? So we have 2 segments. The first is the business building block. And today we'll be discussing about strategy and how to implement them within your business, okay? So you have to follow me closely. And the second segment is about business success story. But I won't reveal the business I'm going to share with you. So that means you need to stay tuned. And also make sure you share this link with friends. It's a learning section for businesses to learn and, find out best practices and implement it as the case may be. So let's jump right into it. The first thing you need to understand about strategy is that strategy is not just a document you create and, you do management retreat to go and stock it up somewhere. Okay? Strategy determines decision. The set of decisions you made as a business. So it's not just a document, okay? It's a documented set of decision, okay? But the key word there being decision. You see, I'm bolding it. Strategy, a set of strategic decision you've decided as a business, the direction you want to go, how you want to be able to lead your business in that. So one of the things you need to understand is that it provides you that framework of activity. So strategy defines what you do and what you don't do. It's very important because in Africa, what happens is that people are jack of all trades, master of none. So there are several strategies that needs to be implemented. And the thing is that strategy can be very unique for an individual because there's the external factor responsible for its strategic success and their internal factors. At times, the external factor can be obvious. Let's say opportunity. Let's say you have been able to identify strength, but there's weakness or strength. So if you don't have a strength as a business to be able to win in the market, then the strategy is going to fail. And it's so important that we need to define our strategy properly in Africa, especially African market. Why? Because the market is fragmented, is unstructured, and the market is very bloody. The competition in this part of the world is high. Now, the thing is that you are not only dealing with local competition, you're dealing with global players. In the last couple of years, because Africa has been deemed to be the last frontier, a lot of all these guys from Asians are already just coming into the continent. They are taking over industry, different sector, real estate, manufacturing, even service business, IT business. So you can't just not have a strategy. And in having strategy, it has to be a winning one. The whole concept of strategy is that you must play to win. So your strategy, how it needs to be documented, but beyond that, you need to be very disciplined. You need disciplined execution of those decisions you've decided to make, which means I'm going in this direction based on this factor, based on this data point, and I'm going to see it through rather than just hopping different strategic ideas. So we need to understand that Africans are price sensitive. Things are pretty unstructured. A strategy helps you to choose the right market, allocate resources carefully, and to be able to stay resilient even in a very tough market terrain. Okay? So let's go into the principle of strategy, the principles that you must follow in implementing an existing strategy to the point that you want it to be successful. The first thing is differentiation. You must be able to differentiate yourself, or at least the plan is for you to differentiate yourself from the sea of sameness. So you cannot afford not to differentiate yourself. So you have to find your point of differentiation as a business. Your point of differentiation, okay, as a business. But before then, there's something that is even the number one thing. It's clarity of purpose. You want to be clear about the purpose of your business. You want to be clear. And in the previous edition, we have been able to talk about the primacy of goal setting and visioneering. It is very important because vision shows you exactly what you pursue and not to pursue. So it's, in fact, you cannot derive the second point, which is differentiation, without unpacking what your purpose should be and to be clear about it. So purpose is very important. Clarity of purpose, clarity of direction. Which market do we want to pursue? Which industry do we want to play? That is super critical, okay? So you need to know that. Then, of course, you need to differentiate yourself. The other important thing that people don't talk about, because it's very soft, is market fit. Now, the third principle you must observe in strategic planning is market fit. Market fit. As a matter of fact, in tech speak, we say product market fit. There's no point trying to serve a market that there's no fit, that you can identify their pain point, and the pain point resonates with you such that there's an exchange of value. So you need to find a market that has a pain point that you have the strength to solve and is mutually beneficial to the extent that once you part way with your value, in turn, you get money in exchange. One of the saying in strategy as relates to product market fit is that there must be gap in the market and there must be an opportunity in that gap. So not every gap that exists in the market has the requisite opportunity for you to pursue it. So it's important for you to recognize that there must be a fit, which means there's a pain point, okay? There's a pain point or there's a problem, a teething problem. And like we said, not vitamins, but if you want to solve vitamins, it's okay. Okay? But it must be real meats. Okay? Real meat. What people really need. If there's gap to sort out vitamin in a good and a prosperous market economy, why not? But what people want is the real meat, is the real deal. So the third point is the product market fit or the market fit. The fourth point is focus. I can't overemphasize on the importance of focus. Like they say, focus creates blindness. Focus creates blindness. Okay? So you can't be jack of all trades. You need to focus. You can't do everything. You need to find few things that needs to be done, and you do it intelligently. You do it consistently with precision and with discipline. So focus is very important in a market. There are different strategies you can use. You can't apply all the strategy. You can't serve all the market. You can't do all the activity. You have to literally pick your poison. Okay? So focus is key. The fifth point, of course, is adaptability. I can't emphasize this, especially for African market. You must be flexible. Flexible to competition, flexible to regulation, flexible to market dynamics, because everything just change per time. So you can't say this is the direction we're going, even though we've said it in the previous point, which is focus. You must be discerning enough to know when the market has shifted, when the customer taste, preferences, and lifestyle have shifted, and you need to adjust to that reality. When the demography has shifted, when regulation have shifted, and all of these market dynamics, you must observe and study them per time, and to adjust your business, your strategy, your business model, your focus once the market changes. Because at the end of the day, you are there to serve the market. So adaptability is very important, even though focus is important. The twin brother of focus is adaptability. On one end, you're focused, you're stable. On the other end, you're dynamic enough to be able to shift with whatever is happening in the market. And so the last principle I'd like to share with you guys is the concept of disciplined execution. Disciplined execution. This is very important. So if you have the best strategy, once you can be disciplined enough to execute consistently in the right direction, to instill discipline, processes, and framework within your business, you are just wasting your time. So, and that's what separates some of the businesses in the global north from the global south. You need to pay attention to that discipline, execution of strategy, and all of that. So those are the 6 points. The first, of course, being decision in terms of clarity of purpose, in terms of differentiation, in terms of market fit, in terms of focus, adaptability, and discipline and focused execution. Now, one of the things we're going to do now quickly is to try and put this a bit into a framework, like a step of how to go about developing strategy and also implementing it, okay? So now the next thing we are going to do, of course, is to to put it into a framework, like a 5-step framework that you can use to execute a strategy. So the first point in this framework, this 5-step framework, is to diagnose the market. What are the inefficiencies in the market, the latent needs, the gaps in the market that are so glaring, the ones that are not so conspicuous? You need to pay attention. For African market, there are a lot of informal. We have a large chunk of the economy in the informal sector. And people like MoneyPoint, they've learned how to master that particular dynamics in the market, and they run a multi-billion-dollar business. So you must look at inefficiency, you must look at the competitors, you must look at the regulators, you must look at the inefficiency, you must diagnose the market so that you find the opportunity that exists within the market, the gaps that exist. So people in payment, people in logistics, that a lot of gap in the market that is clamoring for a change, clamoring for attention, clamoring for a solution. So you have to learn how to diagnose the market, and you need to check. And there are structured way of doing about. You can do this structurally through observation, asking questions, and all of that. But you can conduct a formal research. You can conduct feasibility study. You can conduct market research, product research, and all sorts. Okay. So you can do it in a very structured way, but you can do it also empirically by observing the tipping point, what people are complaining, asking questions from the everyday man as you interact with people from all over. So first, you must diagnose the market. Second point is that you must have a clear positioning. So after you've diagnosed the market, like I said previously, you can't pursue all opportunity. You can't pursue all option. So what do you need to do? You need to position. You need to find out or determine which market you want to serve. Is it going to be niche? Are you going to compete on price? Are you competing on expertise? Is there a unique part of the market that you can corner? Because one of the craziest things you can do for yourself in business is to go red ocean. So you want to find a blue ocean where everywhere there's a lot of space, there's a lot of opportunity. Otherwise, if you pick the red ocean, you'll be competing with shark, and you might not even survive it. Even if you are a shark yourself, a fellow shark can actually get you in a bad place. So you must position yourself. You can't possibly follow all opportunity that exists in the market. Okay? So the big part of number 3 is that you must be able to define your business model. How will the customer pay? What is the right price point? How are you going to collect money? What's your distribution framework? Who are your key partners? How do you really want to build a sustainable, profitable business model? So because it's one thing for you to position, but are you positioned rightly? So it's the formation of a proper business model that answers to all of this. So with the right distribution, the right pricing, the right customer base, the right partnership, support system that you need, then the chances of success is much more in view. Okay? So the 5th point is that you must also begin to test your strategy. So in this instance, you must build for scale and resilience. One of the things you need to ask yourself as a business person from the get-go, or as you begin to go into the strategy implementation, is that, is this strategy built for resilience? Is this dynamic? Can you scale it across Africa? Can you scale globally? What's the impact of policy somersault, currency devaluation, and a whole lot of other things that you might not even anticipate? How well are you prepared so that in the middle of all those chaos, you can actually grow and expand? Because nobody wants to run a business that is stagnant, that is in one place, and is just stressing you out and bleeding funds. So you need to stress test your strategy. Of course, at times, it will take time for that to happen. But if you can do that from the beginning, then you have an advantage to succeed over somebody that is not checking for scale or stress testing their strategy. The fifth and the final point in this framework is for you to measure and adapt. So you must always evaluate. That's why there must be KPIs that you're keeping within the business. That's the key performance indicator. Okay? All KPIs are not alike depending on the kind of business you're running, but the general ones include LTV, churn, retention, attrition, NPS, that's net promoter score, and all of these things. So there are several business metrics, in terms of EBITDA, the cash flow, so across the business, there are marketing metrics, there are business metrics, and all of that. So you must be able to look at your data point per time. That's where business intelligence is very paramount. So you can't just be going on and on and on without sitting down to evaluate on a weekly, in fact, on a daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis. And of course, annually. So it's important for you to always look at that. And this 5 framework constitute the loop. So it's a continuum. You must always check the market. You must always find a fit. You must always, get your business model right. You must always build for resilience. You must always adapt based on market situation. So these are the framework that, can help you. So in summary, we've looked at what strategy is and what strategy is not. Number 2, we've looked at the principle around strategy. There's 6 principles. And number 3, we've looked at a 5-step framework for you implementing a successful strategy.